Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Harold Koenig, and I'm excited to welcome you all to our monthly seminar on religion, spirituality, and health. We will have some time for discussion at the end of this presentation, about 15 or 20 minutes. So be thinking of questions that you have to ask Azleena. So let me introduce Azleena, and then we will begin. Azleena Azhar came to the US from Malaysia to do her Bachelor of Science degree in Information and Decision Systems at Carnegie Mellon University. After spending 20 years in Silicon Valley, she moved to North Carolina and chose a path of community service, obtaining her graduate certificate in Islamic Chaplaincy from the Hartford Seminary. She was a chaplain intern at Duke Hospital, where she received her Clinical Pastoral Education training and currently serves on their Pastoral Services Advisory Committee. She implements a pro bono mental health referral program through the Islamic Association of Raleigh's health team. She is the founder of Hope Sisters, a third space for Muslim women. While pursuing a master's in social work from UNC Chapel Hill, she is doing her practicum with domestic violence survivors and high-risk youth. Her interests include preventing depression and suicide among immigrant and minority youth, promoting resiliency and self-compassion, and harnessing faith to support trauma and grief. So without further delay, Azleena, why don't you take over?
Thank you, Dr. Koenig. I am going to share my screen. I'm speaking today about spirituality and mental health of American Muslims. Can you hear me okay? Okay. All right. I just wanted to give a shout out. I'm wearing my Duke shirt today, but I'm also wearing UNC blue just to, to please my peers at UNC, since I'm doing my MSW there. I didn't want to be show that, that I forgot where I'm studying at right now. So, okay. Can you see my screen? All right. So thank you everyone for attending today. My name is Azleena, and I am speaking today on spirituality and mental health of American Muslims. So an overview, I'm going to speak briefly on who exactly are American Muslims, our protective factors, risk factors and barriers. Where do they go for help? Some cultural aspects of mental health that affect the community and tools for health practitioners and caregivers. Hopefully, we'll come back with something that you can implement or something practical to use in your practice. Just some basic terminology. You've probably heard the terms salam alaikum and wa alaikum salam. So the salam alaikum is the greeting of peace, and wa alaikum salam is the response. Islam is the religion, and it means peace and purity. Islamic, you might hear occasionally people using it for people, but it's really an adjective to describe non-human nouns. So you shouldn't call someone Islamic, for example. For example, you should be using it to refer to Islamic civilization, an Islamic school, et cetera, And Muslim is how you would refer to the people who practice Islam. Arabs are 20% of the worldwide Muslim population, and Arabic is the language. Worldwide, Muslims comprise 1.9 billion people, or 1 in every 5 people around the globe are Muslim. It's the second largest religion after Christianity. A little bit of trivia, if anyone wants to guess what is the most populous Muslim country. Maybe you can put it out in the chat. Not sure if I can see it right now, but so it's Indonesia. Indonesia has 225 million people. And Asia has 1.1 billion Muslims, 58% of the worldwide Muslim population, with India and Pakistan comprising 18%, and the Middle East and North Africa region about the same, and Southeast Asia about the same as well. And Middle East and North Africa has the highest concentration of Muslims there, with 93% of the people there Muslim. All right, the Muslims in America are 3.5 million as of 2017. Projections are by 2040, Muslims will be the second largest religious group after Christians. Currently, the second largest are the Jewish community. And by 2050, it's projected to almost double to 8.1 million. So I did want to give a little bit of a disclaimer that although I'm calling Muslims in America, Muslims in US as American Muslims, but of course, there are Muslims in other parts of America, in Mexico and in Canada, as well as in South America. And for the purposes of this presentation, I am referring to Muslims in the US. So, according to the Pew Research group, Muslims are the second most diverse religious group after Seventh-day Adventists. And 3/4 of US Muslims are immigrants or the children of immigrants. And just in case you're wondering why the 38% of whites here in the graph, and that is because historically the US government has classified people as white if they have origins in any of the peoples of Europe, Middle East, or North Africa. So that includes Middle East and North Africans. This photo, shows American Muslims demonstrating against extremism and Islamophobia. American Muslims are heterogeneous in racial, cultural, religious, geographic, economic features. So keep that in mind. And this one, there's a group that was uniting to demonstrate against Islamophobia. So 65% of American Muslims that were polled find that religious is 65%, is very important in their life. And this is similar to the level of importance that US Christians place on religion, which is 68%, so that's comparable. What do Muslims believe? And many of us already know this, but just a little recap for those who don't. There are 6 articles of faith. the belief in one God, the belief in angels, and which include the Archangel Gabriel and Michael, etc., very similar to the angels in Christianity and Judaism. Messengers and prophets, which are similar as well with Christianity and Judaism, which is, some of the reason why Muslims refer to Christians and Jews as the people of the book, because the revelations are shared, and Muslims do believe in the Psalms and the Torah, Gospel, and the scrolls in addition to the Quran. And also Muslims believe in the Day of Judgment and the divine decree. The practices are generally 5 that identify most Muslims, and that is a testimony of faith, prayer, charity, fasting, and Hajj, which is a pilgrimage to Mecca. Some protective factors of the Muslim community in America. So many have extended family systems, and that has helped to buffer against the stress of acculturation. And they also find that religious practices and participation contributes towards higher levels of resilience and reduces likelihood of anxiety and depression, as well as the risk of illness. Some research that supports faith as a coping mechanism, I've listed here. Religious coping which is a distinct subcomponent of religious identity, is associated with lower levels of distress. And faith practices have a direct positive effect on physical and mental health. So how are Muslims perceived in terms of discrimination? So the general US population have said that 82% of Muslims experience either some or a lot of discrimination. And this is as opposed to 64 and 50 for Jews and evangelical Christians. This is a poll of US adults. And recently, as of 2017, there has been an increase of nationwide anti-Muslim bias and hate crimes, which does affect, as you can imagine, the mental health of Muslims living in America. The most frequent types of incidents are harassment, CBP, hate crimes, and also reports to the FBI and employment discrimination. So Islamophobia and racial discrimination are major concerns for Muslims in Western states. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, some of the types of discrimination include denial of religious accommodations, job terminations, unequal treatment, denial of employment, denial of access to public facilities. And it also does cause a significant amount of trauma to Muslim communities living in the West. So there is a chronic fear of unwarranted surveillance of the mosque, of stop and frisk policies, laws banning forms of the hijab. Sometimes it's not systemic and sometimes it is systemic. Increase in hate crimes and microaggressions. And all of these contribute towards allostatic load, which is the cumulative wear and tear on the body systems due to repeated physiological adaptation to stressors. I'm going to spotlight a few subgroups of Muslim Americans. Immigrants and refugees usually go to mosques and faith communities to replace their traditional extended family and social supports that they've had in their back home, and are less likely to have strong social supports due to being in a new host country. And acculturation is also a source of familial stress. So research shows that second generation Muslims, the children who are born to first generation immigrants, have a difference of opinion in terms of, excuse me, in terms of identity with their parents, and that is a source of stress, cultural stress. And refugees are also likely to be survivors of trauma, of war and poverty, resulting in their immigration to the United States. Muslim youth, especially school-age children, are 4 times as likely to be bullied as the general public. And as I mentioned just now, a culture of stress from parents, and the dominant culture has been proven in research that they do have to navigate bicultural identities and therefore have poor mental health outcomes. Something to keep in mind with your Muslim youth clients. Muslim families. So 15 to 25% report anxiety disorders, 9 to 30% report mood disorders, 56% report marital issues. African American Muslims do have intergenerational trauma, and unfortunately within the faith community, they do experience discrimination from other race and ethnic groups. Therefore, you will find Black mosques being safe havens for many African American Muslims. There is tremendous intersectionality to remember when you do have Black Muslim clients. For example, you may have a Black Muslim female client who is of low income, and if you can imagine what kind of layers of identity that may introduce, especially and its impact to their mental health. Some values as a barrier to service. People with strong Islamic values are less likely to obtain mental health services. Many want to address their concerns from an Islamic perspective, so they first seek help from their faith group. In addition to that, strong concepts of family honor, shame, and guilt keep problems within the family and prevent people from seeking outside help. For those who have experienced trauma within the faith community, they do face a dilemma, because on the one hand, that is the first source of help for them, the mosque and the clergy. However, if the faith community has, for some experience that they may have had, provided some kind of trauma to them, they may not feel safe going there, or they may feel judged going to their faith community, and therefore it adds to their stress and mental stress. Some main reasons why Muslims avoid mental health care: the mistrust of service providers, language barriers, fear of judgment. So Muslim parents are also skeptical of Western mental health providers. And they're concerned that their children may be judged or that their values may be violated by, say, therapists or mental health providers encouraging their children to behave in a way that goes against their cultural beliefs. Double stigma. So there is prejudice and discrimination that's produced both by racial identity as well as mental illness, which is compounded and results in fear of obtaining help from professionals. So where do American Muslims seek help? So the first place up is self-care, and usually within the family, and also informal community care is the first line of help that the Muslim community goes to. And that includes elders in the family, that includes clergy, faith institutions, imams. And this is the results of a New York City study where the majority of Muslims felt that the role of the imam is to counsel and advise, not just for them to go there for sermons, but for them to go for counseling and advice. And after 9/11, there was an increase in seeking imams to address mental health related issues. And what's the problem with that? Well, few religious scholars have any formal training in mental health. The good news is that it is changing, and I'll get to that a little later in the presentation. First, I wanted to go over some mental health beliefs that Muslims hold. The spirit possession is more socially acceptable than mental illness in the Muslim community. Muslims have a strong belief in the unseen. One of the beliefs is that God has created many beings, seen and unseen, who live side by side, some in different dimensions than us. So for example, angels, devils, and jinns are examples of unseen beings. Spirit possession, like I mentioned just now, is more socially acceptable than mental illness. So people may talk about how so-and-so in their family has, is going through a jinn possession and needs to be exorcised, for example. So some symptoms that they may have is intrusive thoughts, religious delusions, hearing voices, etc. And what is usually the solution to that is then people would seek ruqya or faith healing to exorcise the spirits. There's also somatization. Mood disorders are often expressed in a somatic manner in Muslim cultures because physical illness is socially acceptable versus mental illness. So depression may be absent in some languages, the word depression, and cultural idioms revolve around the physical body as opposed to mental status. Many women, for example, ultimately diagnosed with depression frequently present first with physical symptoms and have no self-recognition of physical distress. of psychological distress or sadness. So they may not come in saying, I'm extremely sad, or I've been going through depression because of an event that has happened in my life. They may just present with chronic headaches or sleeplessness, for example. So clinicians may have to tease out the underlying cause. So the rate of schizophrenia, according to research among Muslims, is similar to that as non-Muslims. Religious negative and delusional themes, as well as delusions of ontological guilt, are common in Jews and Christian communities, but are infrequent in Muslim populations due to the differences in belief. And religious grandiosity is also not frequently reported. I do recommend this book, Crazy Like Us by Ethan Waters, that explores what mental health and mental illness means in different cultures, and how there's a chapter that illustrates how protective factors in Muslim societies result in better long-term outcomes among people with schizophrenia. And that is due to beliefs and due to cultural aspects of the Muslim society. So in Islam, there is a prohibition on alcohol and substances. And for Muslims, that is a mercy and a protection. And it also does pose a challenge due to the stigma it causes for people who are actually suffering with addiction. It kind of forces them to go underground and deal with it privately. It's a huge stigma that they just can't have that conversation about it, even within their own families. Rates of alcohol and substance use are lower in the general population among devout Muslims. However, research by the Family and Youth Institute in 2015 shows that there is alcohol use among Muslim college students, where 47% consumed within the past year. And I thought it was interesting that of the Muslim students that felt religion was important, 26% still consumed alcohol. So for neurodevelopmental disabilities, some clinicians, Muslim clinicians, notice that their clients who are parents often don't know that their best friend's children are struggling with some disabilities like the ADHD. This is partly due to the stigma, and they don't realize that it is as common as it is. And oftentimes they socialize with them without knowing that these families are also going through the same thing. Medication is considered a last resort often, and in reality, research shows that 50% of those with ADHD receive medication and 50% don't. So it is a misperception that many Muslims have that affect their willingness to bring their children to seek help. For autism, there is a perception that it's more prevalent in the developed world than in the Muslim world. However, the limited research that is done shows that it's comparable. Many people speak have a delay in seeking help for their children suffering from intellectual and developmental disabilities. Sometimes it's because they believe their child has been exposed to multiple languages, and therefore that's why they have a delay in speech. So it does affect how soon they get help, and it's amplified for obviously for families with severe behavioral issues. So there are some organizations, Muslim organizations in America that have started to help address these issues. So organizations like Muslim, which establish an inclusive and accessible environment for individuals with disabilities. And they have a certification process. So if a mosque meets certain requirements, then they get a different certification, for example. And this is a really nice trend that's happening. Over 55 certified mosques in the country right now with 900 registered families. Some principles for serving Muslim clients. The primary process of their healing must be a patient's identity, their own agency, their cultural beliefs and traditions, and their personal strengths. Before we decide to diagnose them and identify them pathologically, it's helpful if it provides a positive influence in their healing process. Some recommendations is to let curiosity guide you. If you're not sure if if your client is open to having that conversation, you can ask them how important is faith to you and to your mental well-being. Remember that religion is just one factor in their lives, and recognize that there's a huge diversity in the Muslim community. Some additional recommendations. If you work in a hospital or an agency, you can identify allies and collaborate with Muslim doctors. There are pastoral care or chaplain services can get you connections with the local mosque, and create a community directory in your area with phone numbers and contact information from local mosques. Most mosques have websites and newsletters that your clients can subscribe to. And since I'm a social worker, I am a big proponent of Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory. And it's important to encourage connections to your clients' faith and secular support networks for their mental health. So some trends in the American Muslim community is an increasing number of Muslim chaplains as an alternative to imams as clergy. So there are more seminaries and divinity schools that are offering MDiv for Muslims, and hopefully Duke will one day offer MDiv for Muslims. Women chaplains, this picture shows a gathering of Muslimas chaplains in 2016 who are discussing unique experiences of female chaplains. And there's an increasing representation of Muslim and Muslim chaplains in hospitals, military, college campuses, prisons, and some Muslim communities and mosques have started hiring chaplains. Some other trends that are going on, there are some national Muslim nonprofit organizations that are offering continuing education for clergy, both imams and chaplains, so that they are aware of what the mental health red flags are And it's part of training nowadays in seminaries, so counseling 101. Some other trends are Muslim third spaces. So these are safe, non-judgmental spaces as alternatives to mosques and community centers. They have a come as you are philosophy. For example, Muslim Space in Austin, Texas, Center DC in Washington, DC. They provide community support to all ages, and they offer an alternative to the traditional mosque. Also, crisis call and text lines for Muslims, where Muslims are more comfortable contacting if they feel they don't want anyone in the mosque, or they don't want the clergy even to know of what's going on in their personal life. It offers confidentiality, emotional support. Of course, it is not clinical support, but it is popular with youth, as they can just text them or chat. All right, I did want to give a shout out to the Islamic Association of Raleigh's Health and Wellness team, which was started in 2016. It based on the demand for mental health services in our community. And we are welcome to collaborate with any other organization. Some of the top issues that we have seen is marital discord, a lot of youth issues, behavioral modification, some mental health disorders, primarily mood and anxiety, domestic abuse, and other substance use and scrupulosity. So the team right now comprises of 15 mental health professionals, chaplains, and students. And we work closely with the Imam's office, screen all counseling requests to ensure that community members get mental health referrals if needed. I do want to give credit to Dr. Koenig and a few others here, and the full list of references is available on request. Thank you very much. I will now pass this on to Dr. Koenig.
Thank you, Azleena, for a wonderful talk. So we're going to open it up now for questions from anyone there. Just unmute yourself and ask your question. And if you could stop sharing your screen, great. Okay. Very good. Any questions from anyone in the audience? Unmute yourself and ask your question.
Selam Azleena. I was wondering what research topics you would recommend for the scholars to pursue to support the efforts of mental health awareness around in the Muslim community.
Alaikum salam. So there's so many topics of importance right now. I think youth mental health is one of them. I personally am working with NAMI, the Miami-Wade County, on a suicide prevention for youth program. I think we definitely need more research in that area. There are also there's a lot of work and research in the refugee population right now. But it's not around Muslims per se. It's usually around certain race or ethnic groups, countries of origin. Yeah, I think if you choose if you work with adults, for example, could choose mood disorders as well to do a research on how their spirituality has affected their ability to cope with mood disorders and schizophrenia. I think that book that I mentioned is just fascinating. I would encourage you to read that, and it just kind of brings up a lot of cultural aspects to it that I think, and how could we bring some of the strength of coping with mental illness in the chronic mental illness in the family. How can we bring that to our communities here in America? So definitely need lots more research in various areas. Yeah.
Thank you.
I saw that in the chat, someone is asking for how to contact that. So the website, I'll put it in the chat. I'll put the website of the Islamic Association of Raleigh, but also their email, the email address as well is health@islamone.org. I'll put that there. And I see a chat saying, is the AMC open chaplains other than non-Muslim chaplains? I think the AMC is just for American Muslim chaplains, I believe. So I'm not sure if that's your question, because you said other non-Muslim clients, but that's a Muslim organization for Muslim chaplains.
I have a question. Since I have limited background in understanding the Muslim faith, I know that occasionally, if someone publishes something, they get in big trouble with people not liking what they said about their faith. So I want to be very careful in what I might publish in terms of resources for individuals, such as the one you mentioned. That's the alternative to traditional, that come as you are philosophy. I'm just curious if things like that are not received well by the imams. Does that get the traditional Muslims thinking you're trying to do something that they don't approve of? I want to keep myself out of trouble if I give resources.
That's a very good question, because you know, if you Google resources, you get all kinds of results. And that's an excellent question. I would go to a chaplain. I mean, can I ask you what organization you're with? Because
I'm faculty at the University of Delaware, and I have a book in process right now that I'm trying to include resources for people. Other than the science that I'm writing about, I want practical resources such as this that people could turn to if they're struggling with many mental health things. And I don't have a lot of resources for faiths other than Christianity. At this point, it's loaded with Christianity type resources, but I need to think about people with other backgrounds.
Yeah, so the organization that I mentioned, so first of all, actually the university, you mentioned University of Delaware, right?
Yes.
So there, you probably have a religious life organization or a Muslim chaplain that you could reach out to, and I would say they would be a great resource. And also some of the organizations that I mentioned, so the FYI, they produce information on supporting Muslims, and I would definitely go to them. There's also a few large Muslim organizations in the US, like ISNA and IGNA. So some of them have mental health like work groups. And so you could see, check out and see if they have websites to go to. But this is a great idea. I will.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch all those. Can you email them to me maybe?
You know what I can do? I think I'll put some together, and then when this, I believe Dr. Koenig is going to be putting my presentation on the website. So I will have a page for resources that you can go to. Yeah, I will do that.
Good. And email me that list as well, just a straight email. That would be great. And then I'll certainly pass it on to Kathleen and anybody else who wants that list. They can just email me.
Okay, will do.
Thank you.
There's also the Center for Faith and Opportunity Initiatives under the Health and Human Services Department. They actually published a resource guide for all faith, but they actually approached the Raleigh Mosque and asked us what we did. And so there are a lot of resources in that as well. I'll look and see if they have an up-to-date version on their website, and I can share that as well.
Thank you.
So I have a question. First of all, I'm not sure if my microphone is working. Can you hear me?
Yes,
we
can hear.
Okay. Now, studies have shown that in Islam, as in other faiths, generally the more devout the person, the less likelihood of mental illness. And in your own experience in working with people with mental illness, I'm sure you work with Muslims of various levels of religiosity, more devout, less devout, lukewarm, maybe Muslim in name only. Now, have you found that the more devout Muslims have better coping mechanisms with mental illness, better belief in God, maybe a greater sense of meaning and purpose, ability to reference the scriptures, prayer? Have you seen that in more devout Muslims?
So I've seen them both ways. So if they are more devout, generally there is an acceptance, what Muslims call tawakkul. So there's an acceptance of what God has prescribed for you and your life. And so especially if you have a chronic mental illness, there are coping mechanisms. So like dhikr or remembrance or something I'm thinking of the equivalent in Christianity would be like reading the Hail Mary, for example. Meditation. There's also those components that really help with the less severe mental illnesses and with say mood disorders and anxiety. So absolutely, being devout does help in some ways. There are also situations where being devout has become kind of a barrier, because then you feel that, okay, this is what God has prescribed for me, and therefore I'm just going to be patient and I'm going to bear with this, because showing patience and fortitude is sign of, not a sign of devotion, but it shows that I have faith in that I'm a good Muslim, or a good that I'm able to use my faith as a source of strength for all the challenges that I'm facing. So sometimes by the time someone who is devout comes to see a healthcare professional, their condition has kind of escalated, and you see that with, say, interpersonal issues or family issues with abuse. A lot of times, partners who are experiencing abuse don't seek help. I mean, there's a stigma, but then there's also this idea that, oh, I have to bear. This is a test, right? That's very common. I hope that answers your question.
It does.
Assalamu alaikum, Azleena.
Like
Hi, I'm Shabnam Duramsi. I'm speaking from the UK, and I am a therapist, and I also train people in Islamic counseling, which we founded in the 90s, actually. And part of the reason we founded it is because we understood that within Islamic teachings, there are actually very in my experience, very profound understandings of the self and what's healing, which is quite different to Eurocentric models. And I was very interested when you sort of said that, navigating different cultures, and I presume within that you meant the different religious values which kind of underpin society. Sorry, this is a bit long-winded. But the different values which underpin society can actually create stress for people, and that's certainly something that I find for my clients and students. And so actually having a more radical kind of methodological reorientation, rather than using the default Eurocentric models or Western models, has actually been really healing. And I wondered what you felt about that.
Thank you for your question. So I don't have a lot of experience in those models that you've mentioned. I'd love to read more about them if you have any publications or that you've in particular come across that's been helpful.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we sort of wrote a chapter in a book called Counseling Muslims, which was published by Ahmed and Amma.
Yeah, I'm very
also,
familiar with that book.
Also on our website, we have a number of talks and writings, which is, sorry for the plug, www.islamiccounseling.info. And we're also in the process of writing a book on Islamic counseling. But there are a number of, certainly in the UK, and I think in the US as well, there's a number of groups who are now starting to think about, well, in Islam, we talk about the nafs and the ruh, and really understanding things differently. It's been incredibly uplifting for students and clients to sort of work with them, not in an explicitly quote unquote religious way, but to really sort of pay attention to that spiritual dimension and to work from sort of something which maybe is generationally familiar, or I would sort of say even for people who are non-Muslims, it's actually been really effective. So yeah.
Yeah, so just for the other listeners, so the nafs is kind of the equivalent of the ego, I think. Is there another word?
Yes, I think that's good. Or ego. Yeah, I think ego is good.
And the ruh is the soul, I would think.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that and bringing it up. Yes, I didn't bring those aspects up in here, but it is being taught in some of the Islamic chaplaincy programs now.
Just to mention as well, I think that there are actually a lot of imams who are very open as well, I found, to, I mean, there are some who aren't, but there are also a lot of imams who are very open to these ways of kind of looking at mental health. But there are some who are frightened of it, or who are being kind of held to ransom by maybe more traditional members of the community who are smaller in number. So I sort of feel that mental health professionals actually have a role in really enabling that discussion to take place as part of mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like mental health professionals and clergy, as well as spiritual care providers, we need to work hand in hand because of the Muslims in the West. I mean, Muslims in general, but Muslims in the West. It's such a huge source of support and coping. So I definitely encourage mental health providers to seek as much spiritual support for their clients that they can find.
Thank you.
Okay, we have about 3 more minutes. If anybody has questions, this would be the time to ask them. You've got a wonderful specialist in Islamic mental health at your service here, so let's take advantage of it.
I'll try my best. I'm still a student.
I have another question about the preventive methods that can be used in schools to support the integration of Muslim students because of the bullying level. Are you aware of any efforts for school-wide intervention?
Because of the what level? What did you say?
Bullying.
Bullying?
Prevention, like school-wide prevention efforts to stop the bullying and increase the integration of Muslim students?
Yeah, so bullying prevention is a huge area of it by itself. And a lot of it is handled at the district level, the school district level. I did want to mention, I didn't go into Islamic schools a lot, but I do want to shout out before we talk about bullying that Islamic schools, because they're mostly private, they're not obligated to provide accommodations for their students who have IDP. And so, parents who send their children there have to be very wary about whether their child needs extra assistance and really should be getting help outside. So I just wanted to mention that. So about bullying, there are differences of opinions as what approaches to bullying works. And so I would actually try to find out some of the latest research, especially the peer-reviewed literature out there. Some say that sometimes it can work against you, like putting in place some of these anti-bullying programs can actually work against the students, because then it places labels on certain students as being troublemakers and as being bullies, and it becomes like a chronic label that stays with them. And as it is, youth of color, students of color are already highly stigmatized and prone to more disciplined than students who are not of color. And so it's a very tricky situation. Like, I'll just leave it at that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Azleena, for a wonderful talk. And thank you all for some great questions that have, challenged, are challenging questions in general, but I think Azleena has done a remarkable job in answering them. And I'm sure that she would be available if some of you were to email her, if you have any further questions. But other than that, I want to thank you all for participating, and stay safe and God bless.